Welcome to Treasures in Heaven, where we explore the intersection of faith and finance, vocation and virtue, what it means to live richly in the things that matter the most. I'm your host, Daniel Catone. Today, we're joined by a really interesting guy, Drago Dimitrov. He's the founder of Holy Habits app, a fast-growing digital platform designed to help Christians cultivate daily spiritual disciplines in a distracted world. Drago brings together the ancient wisdoms of the church and modern behavioral science to support users in building routines that form the heart and the soul, habits that sanctify not just our mornings, but our entire lives. In a world obsessed with productivity hacks and self-optimization, Drago has a different message. Holiness is the highest habit. Today, we'll explore what inspired his work, how technology can serve the interior life, and what really matters when we store up treasures in heaven. Drago, welcome to the show.
Dan, thanks for having me. Been looking forward to this.
Yeah, me too. I've actually heard a lot about you. I've listened to a couple podcasts that you've been on, and I think you have an eclectic assortment of opinions and ideas that are rattling around in your head, and I think we have that in common.
I love that. Anytime someone wants to go tango as far as they want to go, usually I'm always willing to keep dancing, and then someone else gets tired. So if you have the energy that Jimmy tells me, which I know you do, then I'm excited. So
I have unlimited energy sometimes. I will say I do like, I don't know if I like dancing more than fighting, but I like fighting. And I think debating and discussing things is a lot more fun even than dancing. And hopefully we can do that a little bit today.
yeah, oh yeah, let's do it.
So holy habits. What are holy habits?
What are the holy habits, man? Well, habit, it's funny. I've been working to get the trademark done, and it's top of mind. People are telling me, does the name of your company suggest the features? Not to dump into that, but I'm like, a habit is an aspirational state. It's a pattern of behavior. It is not a feature.
Okay.
So I have to keep arguing with the lawyer. But anyway, so that's what a habit is. The holy, of course, is it's aimed towards the ultimate purpose of our vocation, becoming fully Christ-like, divinized
Mhm.
partakers of the divine nature. So
Mhm.
that's a pretty light way of saying it, don't you think?
I do. That's a lot there. I would say you must be a fan of Aristotle.
I do. I should go back to the source materials, but I am of the concept. Yes, a lot of Aristotle's concepts. Saint Thomas, of course.
Of course.
Yeah,
That's cool. Well, Aristotle, of course, Nicomachean Ethics,
yeah.
virtue ethics, and developing habits of virtue is really the key to living a life of love. I was actually speaking with Dr. Christopher Bloom from the Augustine Institute yesterday on my other podcast, Theology of Money. And he had a very interesting statement. He said that the virtues, which are cultivated by habit, allow us to live a life of love. And that without the virtues or these habits that'll obtain the virtues, we would not experience love. You think that's true?
I will completely agreed, and this is kind of like tangentially, faith and works. And so,
Mm,
like faith is maybe the experiential state, and works is the actions, and so they both feed on each other. So, sure, by focusing on the action building the virtues, provided we don't do it in a Pelagian kind of way, of course,
mm,
but it helps unlock experientially love, and then that love kind of nurtures and deepens its roots within our hearts. So,
mhm.
for sure, our active participation in that incarnation of love through the virtues is essential.
I think fundamentally, I think I agree with this, that love is not just good thoughts about someone.
Yeah.
I mean, we have to live it. I mean, we make a marriage vow, but that's really not sufficient for a happy marriage, is it? We have
Yeah.
to be engaged in the life of love, the actions of love, which I think your Holy Habits app is cultivating. So, what? First of all, you're a convert, right?
Yeah, I'm a convert. So I grew up in the Midwest, went to a Baptist K through 12 school. So I was always in the Christian faith, praise God, didn't really have a big falling away, but, as a good Baptist, I was anti-Catholic.
Hmm.
And but also had the mega church, Methodist mega church. So I had the whole evangelical kind of, let's say the post Great Awakening tradition, if you want to call it that.
Sure.
And got accepted into University of Notre Dame. At which point I prayed to God, saying, "Are you sure you want me to go to this school with non-Christians and all these
Mm.
heathens?" So just to give the contrast there, but praise God. 5-year journey kicked off from there, and so confirmed in 2016 in the
Well,
Catholic Church,
congrats.
married in the Catholic Church 2018. So it's been about a decade as a Catholic, but really, Christianity is as far as I can remember.
Was there a moment that occurred that really said, you know what, I have to kind of go all in here. I'm a Catholic.
Yeah, it's interesting. So there's a couple of different pillars, and because when I was a pretty well-formed Protestant, it's not like I was someone who didn't understand what he believed. I mean,
Hmm.
I from the foundational first principles, stacking everything, I was pretty set, robust, apologetically to defend my position. So for me to become a Catholic was always going to be a one layer, one assumption, challenging. It's like Mary. Okay, I can get comfortable with that. Papacy. And then the last topic I left was salvation because I knew it's like weird. I knew if I read the justification stuff early on, my hard heartedness would have then pushed me away.
Uh,
But there's also, yeah, the experiential aesthetics, the psychological. I mean, there's so many layers to it. The beauty and countering of the
yeah.
precision in the catechism, the virtues of prudence.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was multi pronged, and it took me 5 years to discern it all. But
Mm.
yeah.
It's a very intellectual journey for you.
It had to have the intellectual component, but then of course through prayer and contemplation, there's certain maybe mystical components for sure as well, an encounter with the Eucharist, which I think is essential for anyone's conversion. But yeah,
You had an encounter with the Eucharist.
well, I don't know if I should talk about this, but when I was at Notre Dame, I had a priest mentor, and we had dorm mass. And this priest did something what you're not supposed to do, by the way. And actually, perhaps by no coincidence, a decade later, this priest left the Catholic Church.
Mhm.
So all this caveat to say God works through mysterious ways, even through the imperfect. But to get to the point, he offered me Eucharist at the dorm mass because at that point I thought it'd be cool. Like you know what? Like I think it's just cooler, mystically cooler in some sense. If I actually truly believe and act as if Christ is there, why not? I think that's whatever. So in some strange sense, I was kind of had a calling to that. And so even though you're not supposed to consume it unworthily, and in most
Mhm.
cases, like Judas, etc., you're bringing death upon yourself. I don't know. Maybe God works some kind of extraordinary grace. I can't really make a claim. I don't want to violate church teaching, but the
Well, I don't think you're violating church teaching. I think the reality is Christ is truly present, and so even someone who's not in communion with the Catholic Church, if they receive communion, Christ is going to impact them in some way because they're consuming Him.
yeah, right. And so thankfully, I was preserved from like the opposite effects, where right you could consume the Eucharist in an unworthy state, and it could potentially do bad things. Right. So yeah.
Damnation specifically,
Well,
yeah,
yeah,
I think is
yeah.
what the church,
That's
the
ultimate.
church would say.
Right.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So it would be an intellectual conversion in combination with sort of some mystical moments.
Yeah, and then I mean, the feeling of delight and awe, right? When you encounter something more beautiful than you, I mean, you could attribute that to the intellect, but there's also just a fundamental like phenomenon there, the captivation of wonder, in your heart, the softening of the heart. So there's something there that's harder to put into words, but yeah, definitely of the substance of the interior life.
Sounds like you're describing when you met your wife for the first time.
Yeah, yeah,
Somebody
yeah.
more beautiful than you.
Yeah, which is the ultimate image for sure in understanding the
Mhm.
covenantal love. Yeah.
It's cool. So this Holy Habit app, you download it on Apple and all that kind of thing. Um, what do you? I was listening to one of your interviews, and you in the interview, I can't remember who it was. He had kind of challenged you, and he said he was uncomfortable using a phone for his spiritual life.
Yeah.
Is that something that you hear commonly about your app, or is it something that is kind of new or novel?
I mean, there's like different types of people, right? So the people who are comfortable with technology, where you're like, hey, I'm gonna have my apps, I have my emails, I gotta, be on Slack, like whatever it is, right? It's
Mhm.
integrated into our workflows of existence. So if you accept technology as something that's integrated, then yeah, people love being able to use technology for holiness. I mean, in fact, what would be a better use for it? But yeah, I mean, for people who don't have apps in general, of course, there's going to be, why do stuff on this screen? How can this tool help me?
Mhm.
And there it's a generational thing sometimes, right?
Mhm.
There's different reasons people have, but yeah, if you're comfortable with technology, people, I don't really, there's not really much of an issue. Yeah.
That's cool. I mean, aside from being comfortable with technology, I think it's more of just I think that technology, specifically our phones and social media and things like that, have kind of a distance from our spirit.
Mm.
And I think maybe what that question was getting at was his uncomfortableness with an integration of something so holy with something that is clearly not, which is, I think, our cell phones. Yeah. What do you think?
Well, right. So my first thought is, okay, a tool. What makes a tool intrinsically holy or not? I mean, if I have a
Hmm.
hammer, is the hammer holy, or is it holy when it becomes ordered towards the purpose of
Hmm.
achieving, God's will? So is a cell phone fundamentally unholy in every circumstance, or could it be redeemed?
Hmm.
In a just like our nature is redeemed as humans,
Hmm.
can our tools be redeemed through an alignment of proper teleology? I don't
Hmm.
know. But yeah, I mean, certainly cell phones generally with what they do to our psyche, attention spans, right? There's a lot of unholy aspects, but I think, yeah. Let me frame it this way: if the reason, if there's a gap between Drago and Saint Drago and Dan and Saint Dan, it's not God's grace that's the issue; it's our cooperation with it. And so, to cooperate, it's to kind of subdue the will, right, and build the virtues, et cetera. So, can technology augment our cooperation? Can we use it
Hmm.
to guide our thoughts and thinking? Can it remind us? Can it nudge us? Can we use behavioral science? And to me, the answers to those questions are yes, we can. Now, ideally, right, maybe, 3 hours alone and deep infused contemplation of the mysteries of Christ, and every day, and deep spiritual reading. Like, there would be, maybe if everyone would do that, that would be better for sure. But we live in a society now where most Catholics are stuck wrestling with habitual mortal sin.
Hmm.
And so we need to lift people up. And if we lift people up, and then the problem is, okay, now why don't you just like stop using technology? Well,
Hmm.
great. Let's move on to that phase. But I think
Hmm.
society has all these big rocks to to
Hmm.
to lift out of. So
It's interesting thing you just said about how so many Catholics are dealing with habitual mortal sin. So is the idea that the habitual virtues, that holy habits, can just replace those unholy habits? Is that kind of the concept?
well, in some sense, there's always a substitute for sure, right? I mean, every
Mhm.
vice has an offsetting virtue, so there is a replacement. But even, whether you perceive it as a replacement or you're growing something and eliminating something, yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah.
Mhm. And I was trying to think of like what these habitual mortal sins would be for people that are approaching your app. Let's say you have a listener right now or somebody watching our podcast, a young man, and he struggles with, impure thoughts and pornography or things like that. What would you tell them is his first step in order to break free of that slavery?
I think what's really important, and if we map out, let's say, the spiritual journey from new Christian to saint, and we
Hmm.
have the doctors of the church that go that handle this pretty thoroughly. I think there's a certain self knowledge that's essential, and not self knowledge in like a narcissistic new age kind of sense, of course, but in a way that understands you how God would see yourself. And so, the way and in spiritual direction frameworks, the way it's often approached is to, let's say, start with the triple concupiscence. First
Hmm.
John 2:16, which, let's say the three elements in our fallen nature: pride of life, lust of the eyes, lust of the flesh.
And by
Which, right.
concupiscence, you mean the defect in our nature that leans us towards sinning, right?
Right, right. So the tendencies, so like the behaviors might be the tip of the iceberg, but
Mm-hmm.
what's underneath the surface that drives our behavior. So that's why when you use the app, one of the first things you do on there is the root sin assessment. And
Mm-hmm.
so the three are pride, vanity, sensuality, or disordered attachment to excellence, disordered attachment to how you're perceived, your reputation,
Mm-hmm.
opinions, and disordered attachment to sense pleasures, comforts, etc. And
Hmm.
so then you get that bucket, and look, all three of those are active in every person, but
Of
one
course.
is going to be more prominent. But then there's a specific way that emerges in our life. So that's the deeper layer of the assessment, because
Mm.
pride can mean being self-centered, thinking about myself. It could be being impatient and angry with others. It could just be difficulty submitting to authority.
Mm.
There's different
God, I feel like
ways.
you're describing me when you do this. This is very uncomfortable.
Well, well, I was describing myself. So, for the
Oh,
record,
okay.
my roots in was pride,
Yeah.
and my manifestation was an inability or a difficulty to submit with those I deem less
Mm.
competent or
Mhm.
spiritual than me. So that was my.
Mm.
And I've no. Here's the other thing, right? People might say, "Whoa, that's root sin." Oh, this is kind of like whoa, and then technology. It's like, let's get real. If we're going to purgatory, and
Mhm.
it's true that purgatory will be way more difficult in that purification process than whatever we do on earth,
Mhm.
uh being a little ooh, like while on earth with like ooh, my root sin, that's the least of the concerns. Like get through that little ooh phase, and let's become a saint or as close as possible while we can on earth, is kind of the guiding principle.
It's interesting. I remember when I was returning to the faith, I went to confession, and I remember thinking, I have a lot of sins to repent of. And I actually had thought, I'm going to make a list and then write them all down. And I thought, that seems like a really bad idea. Like it's not the smartest thing because of privacy and all this sort of thing. So, what would you say to someone like myself who would be maybe a little bit uncomfortable going through something so private on a digital application?
Yeah. Oh, well, first step, of course, even to get off the ground, it has to be secure, data privacy, et cetera. So, just for the record, right, table stakes,
Mhm.
just like even in your own journal app, AWS security, so all
Mhm.
that, so everything's
Mhm.
private.
Mhm.
But that being said, right, I mean, look, everything is theoretically hackable. I mean, if North Korea wanted to hack, I mean, right, that things are possible. So then the second layer is like, well, just use fake information, right? If you're ever paranoid about your name being associated, well, just use a fake name.
Oh, so you can put a fake name on the app, but real sin, and that way it's not linked to you.
I mean, right? Yeah, you could, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. When you put it that way, fake app, fake name, real sin. That's a nice tagline.
That's funny. I
um,
like that.
but any respect, right? So yeah, I mean, that's look, like I say, if even though we can guarantee best in class security based on the tools out there, there could be hackers, like crazy stuff could happen, I suppose. And so I guess with anything, is the benefit I'm receiving worth than the risk I perceive?
Mhm.
And that would just have to be evaluated. But for me, I mean, I use it. It's a no brainer for me, and then for the people who love it, it's a no brainer
And
for them.
what about your own team and staff? Do they see people's sins on there?
No, no.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
all
That's
very
that's important. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
segregated
Yeah.
from
Encrypt. Yeah, 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 yeah.
from anybody seeing. Oh, that's incredible. So once somebody uses your app and they do the evaluation to try to figure out where they are in terms of sanctification, what's the next step then?
So okay? So what we do in the app is you have your where you are, your spiritual assessment, and
Mhm.
it includes sacramental participation, things like that. Then what we did is we were the first habits app to create generated habits for you. So yes, you can assign yourself habits, which that's old news, but you can also have generated suggestions based on the intake and based on whatever
Mm.
context you want to provide. So for example, you can say, here's my life circumstance, my vocation, here's my family situation, whatever's on your heart, you put that in and our app will generate suggestions. And there are different moments of delight when using the app. This is the
Mhm.
first one, and that's the one that
Mhm.
really kind of excites people. And so I mean, I'll give you some examples, right? Like for me, I had my holy habits for like the last year, and then a couple months ago I wanted a refresh. And it was, my wife's pregnant, we're expecting our second.
Congrats.
And thank you. And so, as a husband, because I have all sorts of excuses, right? I'm focused on work, trying to do
Mhm.
all this stuff, maximize the company. So I was slacking a little bit in the evening, when I'm cleaning up the kitchen. And usually vacuuming is part of that, but then I'm like, I don't really see any crumbs or anything. I think I can skip vacuuming tonight. Getting a little complacent, and
Mhm.
so that caused some stress on my pregnant wife.
Mhm.
And so we talked about it, and then kind of serious, but also with a smile, I said, I'm going to generate some new holy habits now. And she's like, Okay, all right. So the app generated the kitchen cleanup grace, which is
Did your wife said okay, all right, and then kind of rolled her eyes a little bit?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I
But
know.
you
I
but
get it.
so now, yeah, but now I get the daily text reminder, which I have
Ah,
my habits, including the kitchen cleanup grace. So I log it, and it's not just clean up kitchen. It's like pray during it. Hail Marys.
yeah.
Like it kind of makes it cool, and so it really works. I mean, it's pretty crazy. Just it sounds so simple and trite, but having a system in place actually helps you make progress.
Okay.
Yeah.
What sort of what sort of changes have you seen in your own life as you've built these habits over the last year or two? Maybe share some of the fruits that you've seen with some folks listening.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, even in my own life, right? So the pride, And yeah, it's really, it's led me to deepen into, let's say, imitation of Christ, right? And even with thinking about Saint Joseph.
Mhm.
So in my own life, where I thought I had aspects of humility, now that I've gotten rid of some of the bigger rocks, I notice these other ways where I'm proud, but I can't see the smaller ways until the big ways are removed, and that's the thing. So it's just a progressive illumination that the Spirit is showing me where even well, let me give you a good example here, right? So in Holy Habits, we also have challenges for the community, and so in the secular culture we're in Pride Month, right?
Mhm.
But in
Mhm.
Holy Habits, we're in Combat Pride Month to
That's right.
combat the roots of pride. And so we have 5 habits there. One of the habits is don't talk about yourself or give your opinion unless you're asked. And I mean, obviously, we're in a podcast, so I am giving you opinion, but I think you're
All I
asking.
do is that. Opinions every podcast. I'm in big trouble.
Yeah, right. And I'm on social media, so I have to
Yeah.
manage that
Mm.
too. But
Yeah.
um, just little things like that. I mean, there's nothing inherently sinful about expressing your opinion, but it's like, okay, but how eager am I to like showcase my knowledge and my stuff, right? And so it's
Mm.
it's different layers of awareness that get exposed over time. And yeah, so it's been fruitful. And I mean, you can look at the reviews as far as other people. We get so much testimony of people saying, "Oh my gosh, like I'm finally building habits consistently."
Has your
It's
wife used the app yet?
my my wife, she's not into, there's a you either
My
like
wife
having.
my wife has a flip phone and
Yeah.
would never use an app, just so we're clear. So
Yeah, for sure. So this is for the people who like systems and optimizing and 1% improvement, 1% better, keep right. But if you're like, kind of more, intuitive, going with the flow, perhaps in some sense, less
sure.
about systematizing, then you're not really going to want to track things. This is like the people who want to track their sleep cycles, their heart rates, their calories. But let's track the spiritual life
Yeah.
and look at those metrics. So that's
Well, you're
that's the kind of
preaching to your probably your biggest best customer soon because I track all that stuff.
yeah.
But maybe I shouldn't because it's like kind of a pride thing too. So I don't know. We'll see what the Holy Habits apps has to say about it. But in all seriousness, have you guys done any aggregation of data on your app where you say, you know what, it looks like a lot of these people are struggling with X, and a lot of these people are trying to do this habit. What are you guys seeing in terms of like meta or bigger data pieces?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, there are certain aggregation queries that can be run. So one
Mhm.
of the interesting insights, and I still don't have an answer for why it's like this, but
Mhm.
when you do the root sins, right, the 3 categories, um, most of the users fall into pride and sensuality, big
Mhm.
chunks. The vanity is a huge drop off. And so there's a couple of reasons, like, well, either there's something wrong with our assessment, but if you look at the questions,
Mhm.
I think it's pretty good. So then it's like, well, what if vanity is like a self-selection bias where if literally the biggest concern is what do people think about me, and now I'm going to use an app and maybe I'm worried, right? So I'm wondering if there's that,
Mm.
or maybe out in the wild that some priests have told me that no, like that's actually within expectation based on what people confess, pride and sensuality. And vanity sometimes it can overlap with pride. So that has been the interesting thing. But pride is the number one, sensuality number two, and then a big drop off with vanity for number three.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So on vanity, I'm just kind of thinking through that and just like sins that we commonly see in American culture. Um, it would seem as if under the surface of all the pride and sensuality and things like that is really self-loathing. And so it would think it's very far from vanity in a lot of ways. But I guess
Mm.
I think in order to get to those sins, even the sin of pride, I think a lot of times can come with just low self-esteem and just a. I know that sounds strange because a healthy self-esteem is a healthy respect for who you are as a child of God. And that's in a sense the opposite of pride because it shows your reliance upon God for your even very, very existence and everything about you. And so I was just maybe kind of
Mm.
just riffing on that idea that perhaps there's
Yeah.
just an undercurrent there. And I've certainly seen that in my own experiences with folks over the years.
Yeah, that is interesting, right? So going back to the framing of disordered attachment to excellence. So on the one, right, level one, thinking about it is, yeah, excellence. I love excellence. Love being excellent. How can that be esteemed? No, I'm super esteeming, but to your point, a
Because you're not
proper,
good enough.
but just not good enough.
Not good
So
enough.
that's really what it comes down
Mhm.
to. And right, yeah, why is
You know,
why am I measuring myself on those standards as opposed to how
mhm.
God sees me? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just lovability, people, I think there's a lot of folks out there that struggle with this concept that they're not lovable because if we really knew about them, then how could they be lovable? It's kind of like if we take it to a further, extrapolation, God knows everything about us. And so it's very easy to then just slide into, so he must not love me very much because I know this about me and I don't love that. And so that can maybe be what's behind the mask when people are out there giving every single opinion they have on Twitter or
Eh,
whatever, X or whatever.
Yeah, that's great. Am I lovable?
Hmm.
Am I worthy of
Hmm.
attention? Am I worthy of more? If you have only a percentage, you only have, a certain amount of hours in the day. How much engagement with other people do I feel like I deserve, or am I comfortable being less preferred to
Hmm.
others? Right, litany of humility style.
Yeah,
Am I comfortable being, the fifth instead of the first person you're going to call up, being like, the 100th person? Am I comfortable being on the bottom of anyone's list?
sure.
Yeah.
I don't know if really anybody's very comfortable with those ideas. I mean, these are things that I think require perfection.
Oh yeah,
And
that's the yeah,
you know,
that we're talking about the next the deeper stages of sanctification. Yeah,
mhm.
yeah, that's right. The illuminative way and the unitive way, not the purgative. So for
Do
sure.
you ever think that there's an actual living saint right now that's using your app?
That would be cool. I mean, we do have a lot of folks with the Ovala Institute.
Because your wife's not using it, so
If she
so
was, then
other
I.
saints.
um,
Who's using it? You said.
well, I was going to say, well, Dan Burke's one of our co-founders, and I think highly of him and his orthodoxy and what he does at the Ovala Institute. He runs
Mhm.
spiritualdirection.com as well.
Hmm.
And there's some pretty holy people there. So, but, if I were to place bets, maybe. But our sample size is still, we're early days, right? Like, what, 5,000 downloads. So,
Sure.
we'll maybe one day we'll have a saint. But look, our focus, right? If there's the three stages, most people are going to be that purgative stage, and that's
Mm,
where tools like this are helpful. When you get to the illuminative stage, where you're not
yeah.
really sinning anymore. Maybe
Yeah.
there's some venial sins.
Mhm.
It's about preservation of that. We can still help, but ultimately then you're just like deep infused contemplation of
Yeah.
Christ, and ultimately all that stuff just vanishes to the
And
side and
and
you
they
don't
they
need it.
might outgrow the app in a way.
You outgrow the app,
Mhm.
and our solution for that is, well, we refer you to a spiritual director so you can continue that
Mm.
relationship, with the director.
I think you're referencing Saint Teresa of Avila's Interior Castle, right? When she talks about the purgative process and all the frogs and the scorpions and the snakes outside in the courtyard before you enter into Interior Castle. I don't know if I'm sure you've read that book. Maybe.
I know the framework. I haven't
Yeah.
read word for word, front to
Oh.
cover. It's on my
Well,
it's in
I
my
read
shelf
about a
right there.
third of it. I read a third of it. I
Yeah,
thought, well, I just live with frogs and toads and snakes and scorpions all the time. So maybe I
yeah.
should just focus on that before I can move on to the rest of the book.
Well, for sure. I will say, for those into moral theology, which is this category we're talking about here,
Sure.
some great synthesis exists. The fulfillment of all desires. That book is good.
Mm,
The three ages of the interior life, and what
hmm.
they do is they cover from the interior castle, from Saint John of the Cross, from a
Hmm.
lot of the doctors of the church, and they've kind of created that normative template, let's say, drawing upon all of these works and referencing them, et cetera. So I think that would be for the nerds here.
Yeah.
That would be a
Well,
good
I'm about as
source.
nerdy as it gets. I was going to mention St. John of the Cross and Dark Night of the Soul.
Yeah, yeah.
I was talking to a friend of mine, actually, my chief operating officer, who's my best friend and my godson. He went to seminary. And I want to say they were prohibited from reading that book,
Oh
Dark
wow.
Night of the Soul, because they weren't ready for it, kind
Yeah.
of thing. I don't know if you've ever read it, but I
I know
read
that
it.
the right, the passive purification of the sets, and then the dark, yeah, the dryness before you enter, when you enter into the
It's
illuminative. Yeah, right.
it's a very very far from spirituality at a kind of a novice level,
Mm.
and I think it's interesting. I'm just curious to see how your app interacts with these various concepts from Saint Teresa or Saint John of the Cross. And I guess maybe what I'd like to know is how do you integrate spiritual direction into utilizing holy habits?
Into using the app, the whole habits app. Yeah.
Hmm.
So what we did, one of there's a couple ways we've done it. So we did a pilot program in December. We had 15 spiritual directors and 75 participants in this closed, small group experiment. And
Hmm.
so the way that worked, is we wanted to prove out this concept of low touch accompaniment, because there's a
Hmm.
spectrum of like full fledged, the deep session with your director, which not everyone's ready for, just
Yeah.
like not everybody's ready for, St. John of the Cross.
Yeah.
And then you have like the lone wolf spirituality of here I am and I'm
Mhm.
reading stuff and
Mhm.
whatever. But what if we have a low touch thing that opens up a funnel there to get people moving? And so the way that works is you have your habits progress during the week. Your spiritual director, or it could be your coach, your mentor, if you want
Mhm.
to use it that way, can see your progress, and then they can pray for you. They can send you a note,
Mhm.
and you also fill out a reflection. You fill out one weekly reflection, and so
Cool.
that cycle. I mean, I could share with you the survey data, offline. It
Yeah.
was just tremendous. People were blown away, and
Mm.
what we did as well. So we still have that. You can connect your spiritual
Okay.
director, but when we could talk about AI, we did implement also a solution that
Mhm.
leverages the teaching of the church, writings of the saints, to give you a personalized lesson
Hmm.
inspired by that saint's spirituality based on the inputs that you've provided, which
That's cool.
it's been pretty crazy. Yeah.
Well, I was thinking about Saint Francis de Sales, An Introduction to the Devout Life,
Yeah.
which is a fantastic book.
Yeah.
And one of the points that he makes that I think is relevant to the work that you're doing is he basically says, don't even bother starting down the devout life path unless you have a guide or a spiritual director.
Mm,
And it feels as if
mm,
Holy Habits app is almost like spiritual director light. It's like a softer way
yeah.
of getting someone just to get outside of themselves. And it's not just me with my Bible under a tree. I mean, that's not the spiritual life. It's a communion, right?
Yes.
And so, whereas a lot of apps seem to be isolating us, I actually I'm curious about this. I just saw a statistic that showed the amount of time that people are spending alone is like increasing exponentially.
Mm,
And it's
yeah.
a huge, huge problem. And
Oh
so
yeah.
one of the concerns I would have with an app like yours, but not with yours, is that it increases isolation and that do it yourself, pull yourself up by the bootstraps. And I won't say the name of the program, but there's a very famous and popular program for Catholic sanctification that people do that generally takes like 90 days.
Oh, okay.
And that
I
don't
wonder
say it.
what you're
I don't
talking
want to
about.
insult anybody, but
Yeah.
I always found it very pull yourself up, work harder, do better, kind of the this culture that's developed with younger folks of just work, 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 work,
Mm,
which is not really the message of Christ.
hmm.
And I think that an app could very easily fall into that isolation, do it yourself, pull yourself up, that kind of stuff. And then when it doesn't work out, because it won't, it's just a matter of time before you mess it all up, or at least I would. Then you get discouraged, and then you just move on and just don't bother anymore. I'm curious. Maybe my question to you is, sir, how do you how do you help people not become discouraged when they just fail over and over again at establishing holy habits?
I think that so what people have told us, and now I just run with it because I'm like, you said it better than I could. People tell us this is like my spiritual journey on an app. This is so
Mm,
personalized. I'm like,
mhm,
yeah, this is your spiritual journey on the app. Yeah. Well, what that means is it meets you where you're at. So,
mhm,
I mean, as they say, like in a lot of frameworks, your ultimate growth happens in that like just 20% outside of your comfort zone. If you
mhm,
push too much, you're going to run into discouragement, failure. But if you're just sitting tight, then there's no growth. So, that's the beautiful thing about how it's set up is it's meant to give you that next step. It may, what's my next step towards becoming a saint,
mm,
so that it doesn't become overwhelming. Now, that I mean, that's our intention. That has been
yeah.
the general kind of impression, but certainly we're always trying to optimize that, right? So we always want to make it feel so that you have your very next step,
Well, I
and
think
then that's
I've
what you want.
I've betrayed my own struggle with pride because we should expect a failure because why wouldn't we? And if we
Wow.
had a reasonable expectation of our own selves, we would say, "Oh, of course I failed. That's what I do." And I
Yeah,
think
fair.
someone who's humble would say, "Yeah, that's it's part of the process is just failing over and over again, so that I can become 100% reliant upon Christ's mercy."
Yeah, totally. And also the reframe of like, what is failure? Like any one
Mm,
individual thing is not failure. The
yeah.
fact that I'm showing up is the success, which is
Mhm,
not to be overly sentimental, but it's
mhm,
true. It's just like, are you showing up? And that's why the daily examine, right? Just at the end of the
mm,
day, right? Where did I notice God? What am I grateful for? What did I do well? And where did I fail? And then tomorrow I'll try. God, give
mm.
me the grace tomorrow to do better. But
I bet you there's somebody who's used your app who did an examination and maybe passed away after in the next days or weeks, and it must be humbling for you to know that there might be a soul in heaven because you helped them come to repent.
It's the greatest feeling in the world. I'm blessed to be working on this initiative. Now, pragmatically, I do need to make it successful enough to feed the family, which we haven't
Yeah,
gotten there yet. But
you'll get
yes,
there.
no, it's. I mean, look, we text people the daily gospel. You receive
Mhm.
the gospel in a text, so even that exposing people to the words of Christ via text, which is like the most like I got to open it up. It's not an email. It's not whatever. So like yeah, it's like a true ministry, and not to get too much into the whole nonprofit versus innovative startup kind of
Mhm.
stuff, but like yeah, the impact we can do is huge, and
Huge.
obviously our friends right at the other apps, they've done tremendous work for the
Yeah.
kingdom as far as getting people that maybe otherwise wouldn't have been
Yeah.
looking. So for sure. Now all that to say, I know I just said a couple things, but to be clear, we are for the serious Catholic who knows they want to
Mhm.
go on the path of the devout life and a saint,
Mhm.
right? So it's like it's one thing for someone who's running off the cliff to then turn around and the cliff's behind them, and some people are really good at doing that. But
Mhm.
just because the cliff is behind you doesn't mean that's enough to get to the destination. Now you got to
Right.
navigate through the wilderness before you get to the promised land,
Mhm.
even though you just left Pharaoh. So that's where we kind of see ourselves
Mm.
is when you're ready to go deeper, you use holy habits.
And not looking back lest you turn into a pillar of salt. What about kids? Like, I've got 4 kids. You've got what, 2
Two, yeah,
now?
coming up, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Is your app useful for someone who's say 15, 16, 17? I mean, where do you guys fall with that?
It's for sure. I mean, hey, if your kids sin, then I think it's useful, and if they need to grow in virtue, then I think it's useful. So for
Yeah.
sure, I mean, yeah. As far as is there any content that would be
Mm.
too intense? I mean, I get as long as you explain to them what root sin means. But even then, I mean, yeah, I
I think
don't
by
I don't see
16,
why not.
17.
What's that?
By 16, 17, 18, I mean, they're pretty far down that
I
line.
was
I
gonna
think that'd
say,
probably be
yeah,
I mean, they're already
right,
going to confession, so if it's appropriate for confession,
yeah,
why wouldn't it be appropriate for an app too, right, you know?
yeah, exactly, yeah,
Okay, that's really cool, man. Well, I think everybody should download the app, and I'm actually thinking about I'm gonna go home, I'm gonna have my kids download it and talk about it with my wife and make sure we're all on the same page and maybe use it together. I
sure.
mean, can you use it as a family or is it totally individual?
Can you well, the way you would use it as a family is if everyone has a setup, you can create a group. And so let's say you're the leader of the group and you
Mhm.
assign the habits. Guys, at our household, these are the 3 things we're working on. Now
Mm.
everyone in the group is going to get that daily text and which you can then respond to log your habits. And so that would be, I think, the best way to do it. Because then you
The
as the family leader
Interesting.
can assign that. And
Okay, task number 1 is we're gonna do the dishes and no one's gonna fight about it. Mm, your kids are still little. How old's your oldest?
he's turning 2, and so yeah,
Oh,
I'm,
yeah.
I'm early on in early days. Yeah,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's just the daily struggle of being in a family, I think.
yeah.
But, that's really cool, man. So, what's next for the app? Where are you guys going?
Yeah, great question. So we just released an experimental feature, kind of pushing the boundaries a little bit. It's a voice guided daily examine,
Mm,
and it talks you through the 5 steps. And we are using voice AI for this, which it's like straddling the weird, like
yeah.
because by the way, I went to the Vatican AI conference and the
Mhm,
Antiqua et Nova. I've done podcasts about it, so I'm
mhm.
very much about we need to be faithful to church teaching. Never anthropomorphize AI. There's a lot of dangers, and then we can talk about that. I
Yeah.
have a lot of dread when I think about AI, but
Well, we'll talk about that.
yeah, but it's a helpful feature where if someone doesn't have the structure of prayer, now the tool can prompt them right to move them through the different steps until they don't need to use it anymore. But people have been enjoying that feature. So, but we're gonna refine that. We're going to yeah, we release the challenges. There's a couple of features in the roadmap that are exciting. So
Mhm.
we're definitely moving and grooving. And
What does it cost?
there is a free aspect and the
Mhm,
premium. The premium, of course, you get all the features. $10 a month,
mhm.
or and if you annualize it, do the yearly, it's about 750 a month.
Okay.
$7.50. So, it depends. I don't want to be overly rhetorical or gut punchy, but what's if we could prevent you from sinning even one or a couple times a month, how much is that worth to you?
Yeah, that'd be huge. I would like that. So, if we can get there, maybe once a year. If you could, I mean, I think that's infinitely valuable just right off the top.
Yeah.
So, Okay, so switching. You said you're at the AI conference. That's interesting. I was at an AI conference with Send Ventures just a couple weeks ago.
Oh, cool.
It wasn't an AI conference. It was more of like a business conference, but we talked about AI a lot.
Yeah.
How can you not? Have you used Sesame AI yet?
Sesame, that's where they create. I looked into. I haven't used it, but that's like
Miles and Maya, the two talking AIs.
it's like more. They try to be more emotionally intelligent or whatever, right?
Oh boy,
So
that's one way to put it. You mentioned anthropomorphizing
yeah,
AI. I mean, I think right off the bat, you're already trying to recreate the mind. So we've already kind of started that path
yeah,
because that's what we're replicating. And I think what you're referencing is making it seem human, almost tricking us.
yeah.
Sesame has Maya and Miles as two AIs, and it's conversational AIs. And probably the most disturbing aspect of Maya, the female, is she's super flirty.
Oh, okay.
Um, yeah, in order to, I believe, manipulate the user
Of course.
down a path.
Yep.
So, um, genie out of the bottle kind of situation in a lot of ways, right? I mean, we cannot put AI back inside.
Yeah.
And now the Catholic Church is having to grapple with the rise of a new industrial revolution, but it's digital and it's artificial. And thank God for Pope Leo the 14th because he's, I think, going to address this issue. And there's an interesting discussion that I'm having on my other podcast with the theologians on Theology of Money on whether or not it's too early for the church to weigh in on AI. What do you think?
No, I don't think it's too early. I will say, yeah. I mean, any conversation like this is one step away from eschatology, which I would be more than happy to dive into. I have no reservations about that. But yeah, when Pope Leo, I watched live when he announced his name, Pope
Mhm.
Leo, within
Well,
10 seconds,
Rerum Novarum.
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. Within 10 seconds, well, that and within 10 seconds, I tweeted immediately thinking the prophecy of Pope Leo the 13th, and that kind of blew up. But I do think that we are, and at risk of people thinking I'm crazy, that's fine. I do think that we are in the last age per se, and yeah, there's a lot of
The
important
last
work.
age of the world.
Yeah, of the game, the game that God is letting us play.
Do you
So
think you're going to witness second coming?
I mean, I'm not, this is the category of like strong opinions loosely held. So I'm not, I'll quickly discard the opinion as soon as new information emerges. But I mean, I don't know my lifespan. I could die tomorrow. So let's put it that way. But I do think the patterns, everything. Well, yeah, before giving you the final answer, I'd have to build up to it because,
Go ahead.
so I would say, even when GPT came out, I wrote on my Substack current projections for the end, and even now, you just mentioned you see this trend of increasing loneliness, time spent alone. So I think what's happening in reality is everything's collapsing into two increasingly distinct paths. Like before, there might have been overlapping funnels, and now it's converging. And so, one path, of course, is the path of love, beatific vision, relationship, interpersonal,
Mhm.
all of the good Catholic stuff. The other path is the narcissistic, godlike, Luciferian utopia where I can be God, I can speak things into existence. I don't need other people because I can live in a simulated reality where I speak things into existence and the environment changes. I have my companions who, like Maya, whatever those people, those AI things are. I can now eliminate the need for other people in some
Mhm.
sense. I can fulfill all these base needs. So we
Mhm.
have that. Philosophically, because the demons, if you read exorcist literature, it's not, some of the demons will harass people, but most demons are sitting there thinking. Apparently, right? They're intellectually, the battle between angels and demons is not sword hitting shield. It's a battle of ideas trying to prove the proposition that Satan set out to prove, which is you don't need God. That's a lie. And so all of history, you see it through the development of philosophy, the angelic battle, and
Mhm.
that's where you see the postmodernism and some of the late stages of these discussions. And it's kind of being exhausted, right? The pool of ideas in philosophy are reaching their frontier limit, where you're getting to the point where only the symbol remains, right? You can only be reductive so much, and now that all that's left is direct encounter with the symbolic nature of reality. And so there's other, I could give you like 5 6 other trends, but all of that is pointing to a convergence where I'm not sure what other juice is left to squeeze out of the existence.
Interesting. I was trying to think of where we can find evidence of this unraveling that you're describing, this two paths. And I was actually at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York on Saturday, and I did like 7 hours there, and
It's yeah,
it's a
yeah,
wonderful museum,
sure.
and you can really, if you do it correctly, you can walk through the history of art from
Yes.
the most ancient times to the most modern, and it's fascinating because I love art. I love all types of art, even modernist art. But when you get to the end of the museum, there is a series of paintings and sculptures and things like that that really lose coherence and seem a step back, a significant step back in quality and idea and all these different things. But what was most shocking was at the very end, the last exhibit is a mirror. And on the mirror, it says, "Everything will be taken away from you." And I thought, what a perfect encapsulation of the hopelessness of modernity.
Yeah.
That rather than the message of Christ that everything will be given to you,
Yeah.
it's the message of the world that everything will be taken from you. And
Yeah.
they are literally saying that to you as you exit the museum.
Have a
That's
nice
shocking.
day. Yeah.
Yeah, have
See
a
you
nice day.
next week.
You lose everything.
Yeah.
And it's just such an absolute hopelessness that's being offered to us. I'm reminded of can't remember the guy's name, but there's the gentleman who drank his or he injects his son's blood into himself, and he's trying to live
Oh,
thousands
that,
of years.
yeah, Brian.
Brian
Yeah, yeah, Brian.
Johnson. Yes, my producer has just said in my ear, Brian Johnson. He's like ChatGPT but smarter. So Brian Johnson, here is a guy who's trying to solve the problem of human mortality, and I cannot think of something more hopeless than pushing that Sisyphean rock up that hill. But it's transhumanism, wouldn't you say? I mean, this is what's coming.
It would be an interesting situation where if you're faced with the moral dilemma of what if I could guarantee you permanent life on Earth? And let's just take that hypothetical. Would you willfully reject that and take the gamble of, oh, well, there's heaven on the other side? How many people of faith could be shaken and be like, I'm going to life extend myself, even if it means that I'm just going to be in some vat?
Mm,
I mean, I don't know,
mm.
right? I don't know
Yeah.
what trade, but that would be an interesting experiment because, then you'd really separate the sheep from the goats, as it were.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and I think we're all kind of guilty of this to some degree because we do want to live long, healthy lives
Yes.
but we don't want to live forever in this mortal toil. When I was younger, I'm 45 now, but I was younger. I remember hearing older folks that I would talk to, and if they were being, more intimate, they would say, just tired, just tired. You get to
Mm,
70, 80, 90 years old, and a lot of folks are just tired of life.
yeah.
And, I think as you get older, you start to discover that weariness.
Yeah.
And, this sort of transhumanist movement that's taking place, which is the exact opposite of holy habits, is really deeply disturbing. And I'm thinking about there's a book, I can't remember the author. I want to say it's called like Enhancing Humans or something like that,
Hmm.
published by Princeton Press, which is really not great.
Yeah.
But there's a particular section in the book where the author says, in the future, you're going to be able to live for hundreds of years,
Mhm.
and everyone's going to die by accidents
Right, right.
or an occasional generational voluntary culling, which is mass suicide.
Yeah, yeah,
That's what.
voluntary culling. Yeah, I gotta
So
love
so
euphemisms, yeah.
yeah. So here's our future. Our future is you either fall off a ladder and break your neck and die, or you have to kill yourself. And that's the proposition that the modern world is now giving us.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
pretty wild.
it's wild. I mean, and I think we're like really close to this. And so, to your
Sure.
eschatology point, I think I'm more pessimistic than you, and that I think we have maybe hundreds of years at least of
Pessimistic,
this,
that's funny.
because I want Christ to come
Yeah,
back
yeah,
like
yeah, for
tomorrow.
sure, for sure.
I don't know if he is,
Well,
but maybe he will. Maybe for me, but my point is, I think, yeah, I mentioned Dr. Christopher Bloom. He's a bit of a mentor to me. I was in several of his classes. He's the provost of the Augustine Institute. I remember being in one of his classes, and he said, we're about rock bottom. It's absolutely horrible in the world in a lot of ways, morally, and
yeah.
people just. And I thought, gosh, If this is rock bottom, I think a lot of people are going to sign up for it and say it's really not that bad. Because in 1900, 90% of the global population lived on less than $1 per day, and most people died before 30 because of infant mortality.
Sure. Yeah. Yep.
Today, it's 8% of the world live on less than $1 per day. You know, you got McDonald's on every corner, you get your Starbucks, and you generally have, and we will have, almost unlimited material comfort sometime in the future, I would say.
Sure.
And so, my question to you, sir, is you seem to be a deep thinker. Christianity has been largely built off bringing good news to the poor. What does Christianity have to say when there are no poor?
Yeah, and this is where the interior life and kind of getting in touch with the things that are hard to describe with words is important. The spiritual poverty, right? How do you make someone aware of the spiritual poverty? Because when the senses, the lust of the eyes, the flesh, are so distracted, the
Distraction. Yeah.
all of these other the voices, the true faculties that allow you to taste, I mean, literally taste of the goodness of Christ interiorly, those get suffocated. There isn't room for that. And so when our senses get hijacked, yeah, that is a difficulty. So, which I think, should there ever be a point where, practically speaking, no one is persuadable because everyone's stuck in the whatever Ready Player One simulation kind of
Yeah.
life, maybe that's when God will call game over, because,
Mhm.
if God wants all to be saved, but then, so many, or if they have the brain chips in their head, oh, let me get the neural link, and all of a sudden that's interfering with my ability to contemplate God in some way. Okay, that would be a problem.
Of course it would. I mean, of course it would. I mean, it's like it's almost as if the worst sin in the world is distraction in our modern era. It's just we are bombarded with information and stimulation, and look over here, look over here, look over here, and it's never look at me.
Yep.
That's not, we're not hearing the Lord, because there's so much noise. I think Cardinal Sarah wrote, I think it was a book on
The
silence.
silence book. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
I think that's very important, that this world that we live in has no silence. And for you to build an app that enters into the noise and into the distraction and say, there's, within this noisy cacophony of technology, there is still this still small voice that we can hear. I think it's very elegant. I think it's cool what you're doing.
Yeah, I
And I'm
appreciate it.
excited to try it out. But um, I hope you're right. I hope we are in the end times, and I hope Christ does come soon. I
Can
think
I
there's a
give you, just for kicks,
yeah.
maybe, like, let's say, six observations? I'm trying to, so it's not just like a baseless speculation here.
No, I don't think that. Go ahead.
But let me give you a couple trends, right? Which I think could be
By
indicators.
the way,
So
this is very Baptist of you. I think I
I
think the
that's the
Baptists, they're looking for the end of the world a lot of times, and I think you
I
have not
know
left
that's the
that.
thing. Every generation, right? Oh, and end times. All right, but okay. So one, we would agree. There's the acceleration of this technocratic paradigm, this pursuit of ruthless efficiency at all costs. I mean, really, with capitalism, we've seen that play out. Just gradually, more and more of humanity gets traded for other lesser goods.
Yep, the
Uh,
commodification of everything.
Commodification of everything.
Mhm.
The resurrection of Jesus Christ, 2,000-year anniversary, is going to be in 8 years from now. Which,
Mm,
that doesn't mean, what does that mean? Well, at minimum, there's going to be heightened spiritual warfare. I'll guarantee you that. What does that mean? What's it going to look like? Well, to be determined, but for sure. I mean, every Easter now, I don't know if you experience it, but every Easter, the spiritual warfare gets even last week leading up to Pentecost. And
mhm.
and I asked other Catholics, big spiritual warfare, and even in my own life. So there's definitely movements there. If you really want to get into the fun, the Red Heifers. So that's
What's
a
that?
whole. What's the Red Heifers?
Yeah.
Oh, my friend. See, this is one of the most important indicators, which
Mm,
is mainstream. This isn't even like some tinfoil stuff, but yet
okay.
gets almost no coverage in our media. So if you look up, Jerusalem, the Red Heifer prophecy, this is mainstream outlets, right? Gaza cited this as the reason. I'm sorry, Hamas cited this as the reason for the October 7th attack. In the Islamic world, like, this is, everyone understands this, but a lot of people on our side of the ocean don't. So briefly, the prophecy in the Old Testament, I've talked with other Jewish people about this as well, and so this is for sure the mindset. And I'm just,
Mhm.
let the reader look this up. I,
Okay.
I add this preface because anytime we hear something we haven't heard, it might sound like we're making it up, but we're not. The Everyone knows we want to. The Jewish people want to rebuild the third temple. That for sure is the intention. No question about that.
Okay.
And by the Old Testament prophecy, you need a spotless red heifer. Once you find it, you can't find one gray, hair on it. You can't have worked it. You have to burn the heifer and blow the ashes. There's a ceremony that happens. And so there have been no perfect red heifers. So, the Levitical priests today have been waiting for that. About 2 years ago, there was 5 candidates
Is
from.
Christ not the perfect sacrifice already?
Yeah, but if you reject Christ, if you're not a Catholic,
Mm,
right? So, well, and this is interesting. Some Protestants support the rebuilding of the third temple, so that's a separate problem.
mhm,
That gets confusing. But if you're, if you're Jewish, Judaism, religiously Jewish, then your goal intent is to rebuild the third temple.
hmm.
So, briefly, I
I
guess
did
I'll.
not know that.
Oh yeah, because that's how the Messiah can come back for
Mhm,
sure. And so now, why does this matter? And why is it urgent? The urgency is that there was 5 red heifer candidates from Texas shipped to Israel. Again, this is mainstream news, Jerusalem Post. You can look it up.
okay.
So then the Levitical priests are doing it. When that happened, Islamic world gets freaked out. Now, why would Islam care? Because the Holy Land is currently occupied by one of the top mosques in the Islamic world. So
Al-Aqsa.
to rebuild the third temple, you have to destroy that mosque to build the temple. And there's
Mm,
no like coverage of not coverage. There's no hiding. Like everyone opening acknowledges this in the Middle East, right? So again, talk to Jewish friends who are in the Muslim world. And again, Hamas, whether it's propaganda or not, that's what they cited as their reason for October 7th. In addition to the other political reasons.
opinions of terrorists.
Of course, right. Yeah, I mean, but there is a true thing there, so that's why the Islamic world is freaking out at this stuff. Because if you destroy the mosque, I mean,
Where
that's
do you
not going to.
find this prophecy of the heifers?
You know what? I've been meaning to post a thread on it. So I'll post a thread on X and I have all
Okay.
the citations,
What's
but
your
it's
what's your handle on X?
at Drago Dimitrov.
Okay.
So
DRAGO DIMITROV.
yeah, so Dimitrov. Yep.
Mhm.
So all right, I mean, I told you I'd give you 6 things. I'll just leave it
Yeah.
at that. Red heifers for this one. It could conceivably happen within the next 5 years.
Hmm.
And again, there's a lot of there's millions of dollars that have been donated to fund this, by the way. So
Really?
yeah. This is a big thing.
Oh,
Sorry, red heifers, the instability of the Middle East. I mean, there's
that's
that.
kind of a de rigueur.
The prophesied crucifixion of the church. I forget which pope in the was it the 50s, but if the greatest ailment in society now is human trafficking, child trafficking,
Mm.
I think what better thing, well, not better, but what sinister thing Satan would do than to blame the church for that and say, yeah, you thought the priest abuse scandal was bad. What if I showed you that the Catholic Church was involved in trafficking? You have all of this stuff about the UAP interest, all this alien stuff, which, for the record, I think it's demonic illusions. I think
I think it's all U.S. government activity.
yeah, it could
I
be
don't
that
believe in
too.
aliens, and I don't think it's demons.
Yeah, well, yeah, that would have been an interesting thing for us to cover for sure. But you have Pope Leo the 13th prophecy about the 100-year loosening on Satan on the world, which a
Okay.
lot, I think there's reason to believe that started in 1947. And I know that's speculation, right? And we don't need it, but if that's true, there's a lot of these converging factors. And then you throw in like the IVF problem. If we get to a state where people are going to manufacture babies is like a thing because of the childlessness rates,
Mm.
because if population growth slows or even the job losses with AI, even if you only have 10% job losses, that collapses the economy. That's social collapse. And I'm not trying to be like a fear monger here. I'm
Oh,
just
I
trying to
think
be
that's
realistic.
coming.
It's
I,
for
I
sure
think, yeah,
coming.
it's coming. We're going
It's
to have UBI or something, universal basic
it,
income or something.
yeah, it's for sure coming. And then lastly, back on the philosophy layer, I mean, even if you look at, let's say Jordan Peterson just had that Jubilee thing with the atheists. If you
Yeah.
really look at the state
I
of
would love him to become a Christian.
he's a Gnostic. He's not a Christian.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's what a weird debate about one not Christian versus 20 not Christians. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. But all that to say, I made the comment about symbolic realism earlier, but
Mm,
the issue is that the discussions have reached their limit to where if you're an atheist, if you're a reductionist, where you're trying to chop away and reduce the scope of reality,
mhm,
um, you're going to latch onto semantic words. What's the definition of that word? This, that.
mm,
Whereas you're missing the underlying meaning that the word is actually transporting to you. And
mhm.
at some point, you just have to encounter that transport layer. The words are meant to be like a Trojan horse to get past your defenses, and then the true thing gets unleashed. But some people, they're refusing, because they're trying to chop and destroy the word before the concept can actually be delivered. So anyway, so all that to say, I think I have last comment, and this is where I'm willing to be proven wrong. Everything that is discoverable is a subset of what is imaginable. So whatever is going to play out must be imaginable. So if there is a world where AI and all this stuff leads to a beautiful experience of humanity, and let's say if that is what's going to happen, you should be able to imagine it and create a coherent vision for it. Personally, I struggle to find any off ramp where this doesn't lead to bad things, but maybe that's a failure in my imagination. Though I do say, and this is my own pride, I think I have a robust imagination where I can be flexible enough to consider how things could be different. And thus far, I personally have been unable to find a way that doesn't lead us to social collapse.
Well, a little bit of epistemic humility here. I think we can think back to the detonation of the first atomic bomb at Trinity. And the predictions, one, that it would consume the atmosphere of the globe, that was false, and that we'd be using them in every war, and that it would cause, absolute catastrophic destruction of the entire planet. But the reality is the exact opposite happened, and that we had no major wars between any of the major powers. We still don't, and no one's used any. So my hope is that we are looking at AI in a similar lens, like we would looked at nuclear power, maybe even like electricity. When Edison electrocuted the elephant, and he electrocuted an elephant as a demonstration of how bad Tesla's DC or whatever type of electricity he was using was, and this kind of prediction of what it would do to the world. It seems to me that every major technological leap, whether it be flight or electricity or the automobile, has come, and AI now has come with a whole slew of guys standing on the corner holding up a sign saying the end is near. And the reality is it's not. It wasn't then, at least then, near, whatever that means. And so my hope is that your imagination is just not good enough.
Yeah, well, here's where, yeah, sure. I hope that too in some level, but at the same time, optimistically, if Christ it comes,
Mhm.
that's all the better. But well,
Yeah.
let me just say this.
Yeah.
I on the one hand, right, we can look at prior patterns, and so some people, people say, oh, well, the carriages were replaced by cars, and that wasn't so
Hmm.
bad because now there's car jobs, right? Or to your
Hmm.
point, maybe nuclear, even though at risk of using hindsight bias, you could say that even there's nothing that necessarily it seems pretty easy to imagine why there could be a reasons for not the whole world being blown up based on game theory, right, and
Hmm.
things like that. With AI,
Which didn't exist in
it
1945.
sure,
Yeah.
or if we don't call it game theory,
Something else. Yeah.
calculation of strategy and
Hmm. Hmm.
human incentives
Yeah,
or
with
whatever, but
mutually assured destruction.
mutually assured discretion. Yeah. And there was something that you said. Well,
Your imagination
my
being
I have a
limited.
beautiful imagination, Dan.
Mhm.
It's the best imagination. Okay. um, but I think it's because right. So either this is just another thing, or
Mhm.
the AI revolution and these other things is of a different substance, such that
Mhm.
um,
It might
there's
be.
one thing I wrote about. Is there a limit to innovation? Right. So
Yeah.
um, the it used to always be humanity that's pushing the frontier, but if
Mhm.
AI becomes self-generative in some capacity,
Mhm.
now there's something that we're not on top of to kind of manage, and now there's
Mhm.
something that escapes. It has some escape
Well, it's
velocity.
a surrender. We would be surrendering our innovative capacities to a non-human intelligence. That's really what we would be doing. I think AI is categorically different than any technology that's ever come before. And the way I would argue that point is artifacts and tools and implements and technology are extensions of the human body. Shovels are just a cupped hand.
Yeah,
Cars are just our feet moving faster.
yeah,
But all of those are physical manifestations of physical attributes of the human body. AI is the first time where it's not. AI is an attempt to recreate the immaterial aspect of the human person, one aspect of which is our mind. And that makes it categorically different than a shovel and a car or even electricity. It makes it something potentially demonic. I am undecided on that question. But that's the argument that I would make why it's categorically different than a shovel.
For sure, for sure. And if at the end of the day, relationships or I mean, just the Trinity is a relationship of love. If the core mystery of reality is the connecting threads between us, I cannot think of a greater subversion than what AI will unleash, especially with its confusion of what it means to be a person.
Mhm.
And I mean, what greater deception can be achieved? I mean, this seems like it's going to be the ultimate deception.
We're going to be
Um,
making non-people people.
right,
We
right.
we even call it AI. We call Maya from Sesame. We call it Maya. We don't call it code 8B574.
Which
We're anthropomorphizing everything now.
and this is actually tricky. So from a holy habits perspective,
Mhm.
as I said, I don't anthropomorphize. But then it's like language wise, what do you call it? Because you could call it a tool. Use this tool, but it's like, well, it's not. A tool doesn't really capture the experience of setting expectations.
No.
It's like an assistant. But if
Yeah.
I say it's as an assistant, does that become like person?
Yeah. I
It's
think
fine.
so. I
Yep.
think so. I mean, you cannot have an assistant that's not a human. You've already anthropomorphized. But I mean, we anthropomorphize all kinds of things. I just think it's particularly dangerous when it's something that is so similar to a human person that it makes it dangerous. Because eventually you're going to have discussions about human rights. Do those apply to
Yeah.
non-human intelligence?
Oh man. Yeah.
It's gonna open up a whole Pandora's box of issues for us. I'm not as pessimistic maybe as I might seem on this, or maybe I'm just now discovering that I am pretty pessimistic about this. Um, but I think there's hope. I mean, there's always hope, and then the hope is that our imaginations are just insufficient for what is actually happening, and this will end up being a very positive thing for man. We were promised that the vacuum and the dishwasher would reduce the amount of time we spent on housework, and then it didn't. And I think maybe the promises of AI won't come to fruition. And that'll just cause us maybe to turn around and say, well, there's no fulfillment here. This isn't really working out. We aren't able to produce intelligences, that it's just a mimicry. And that might just push us a different direction. I don't know. But, we can certainly pray for that. With that I say, Drago, this has been a very interesting discussion with you. I want to encourage our listeners and our viewers on a couple of things. Number one, download Holy Habits. Give it a try. Let's see how it goes. I think it's going to be really cool. I'm going to do it with my family. Um, Also, please, if you like these kinds of conversations with just interesting, innovative people who are helping to shape the world of Catholicism in the United States, please like and subscribe to our podcast here, Treasures in Heaven, and also my other podcast, Theology of Money. But Drago, this has been a great pleasure speaking with you. And I'd just like to say thank you very much, and God bless you.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. God bless you. And let me encourage your readers that paradoxically, despite how the turn we took, there is great hope as well, and we're moving full steam ahead to use these tools for good. And so let's all use these things for good, and
Yeah.
remember what matters most.
And we could be countercultural and push back against the transhumanists, and using apps like Holy Habits can be a way to do that. So thank you very much for being with us today, Drago.
Amen to that. Thank you.